Today I will be drawing a table of subjunctive verb tense endings. So this first column is going to be for the different tenses. You'll notice here we only have 4 boxes. That's because the subjunctive only has 4 tenses. There's the present, the imperfect, the perfect, and the pluperfect. The 2 tenses that are missing here are the future and the future perfect. There are 2 voices, so the active and the passive voice, in the subjunctive tense. Then each of these 8 boxes represents one of the different voice tense possibilities for a subjunctive verb. Each one of them starts with a certain principal part. So the present active starts with the second principal part, as does the present passive. So does the imperfect active and the imperfect passive. So they all start with the second principal part. The perfect active starts with the third principal part, as does the pluperfect active, and the perfect passive system uses the fourth principal part for the subjunctive mood. This is actually very similar to the perfect passive system for the indicative mood because it also uses the fourth principal part. Now we'll see that the different endings changed based on the conjugation. So if you have, for present active, if you have a first conjugation verb, then you subtract the ending, so you get the stem from the second principal part. So if we have navigo, navigare, you just take the navig part, so you subtract the are from the end, and you add on an e. If you have a second principal part, or a second conjugation verb, like wideo, widere, you would take off the era, so you just have vid, and you would add on ea. This is the vowel change. For a third conjugation verb, it would be a. So duco, ducere, you just take duc, a, and then the personal endings, which I'll get to in a minute. And if you have third, I-O, or a fourth principal part, it's not really a 4, is it? Then you would add an IA. And a good moniker to remember this is we fear a liar. So what are these personal endings? Well, they're the same ones that exist for the present active indicative mood. Instead of O, you have M, ST, mus, tis, and T. And how do you translate a present active subjunctive mood verb? Well, it would be subject or whatever else your sentence is, may, and then the verb, period. So for the present passive, it's actually very similar in terms of this vowel change. So I'm just going to write, we fear a liar. And you'll know to differentiate the different conjugations based on the vowel changes. So this is first, this is second, this is third, and this is third, IO plus fourth. So these personal endings, though, they change for the passive voice, and they become the ones used for the present passive indicative. Aris, tour, more, mini, and tour. The translation obviously changes to subject, rest of sentence, may be verbed. The imperfect active and imperfect passive are probably the easiest because you don't have to change the second principle part at all. You just leave it the way it is, and then you add on your personal endings. M, S, T, mus, tis, nt. And you do the same thing for the passive. You just add on those personal endings, ris, tor, more, many, and tor. The translations here are blank, a rest of sentence, might, blank, and blank, might be, blank, ed. So you see the two signal words are may and might in these kinds of translations, because it shows doubt about something occurring. And that's why you don't actually have a future or a future perfect tense in the subjunctive mood, because it already expresses doubt about future events or possible events. If you have a third principal part for the perfect active, you remove an I. You also do this when you're constructing the pluperfect. And then you just add on erim, eris, eret, erimus, eretis, erent. This is very similar to the future tense of the verb of being, but there is a notable difference, and that is the use of erent instead of erunt. It's also similar to the future perfect indicative endings, except for in those you use ero instead of erem. And the translation is blank, rest of sentence, may have blank. For the fourth principal part, you need to differentiate between the genders, so you have a masculine, a feminine, and a neuter form. And you just leave it the way it is. You add a space, which I'm representing here with an underscore, and then the present active subjunctive mood form of the verb of being, which is sim, sis, sit, simus, sitis, sint, based on the person and number. The translation is blank, may have been, space, ed, or not space, but verbed. Blank may have been verbed. For the perfect, let's go back, pluperfect, sorry, let's go back to that. We've got this third principal part, we remove the I, and then we add I, S, S, E. So we never really took away the I, but it's easier to think of it this way. And then you add on, and this is notably different from the perfect tense, you add on the present active personal endings. So M, S, T, mus, tis, enti. So that's notably different. Make sure to remember that these endings are different from the perfect active subjunctive mood personal endings. And the translation is blank, might have, blank, might have, and then verb. So you'll see that there's a connection between the imperfect and pluperfect translations and the present and perfect translations, if that makes it easier to remember. For the pluperfect passive subjunctive mood verb, you also have use the fourth principal part. So that's differentiate between masculine, feminine, and neuter, the three genders. You also use the fourth principal part, add a space, similar to the perfect passive subjunctive mood, and you add, instead of the present active subjunctive mood of the verb of being, you add the imperfect active subjunctive mood of the verb of being, which is assem, assem, assess, asset, assemus, assetis, assent. And you'll notice that this is again formed with the second principal part and then adding on those personal endings. So it doesn't really change for the verb of being. So you can remember this by using the imperfect active subjunctive mood translation form. And the translation of the pluperfect passive subjunctive mood verb generally is blank might have been blanked or verbed in this sense. Remember that all of these translation forms are not set in stone. They can change based on the context in which these verbs are used. And there's a lot of different contexts that will be explored in greater detail when we talk about the independent subjunctive uses and the dependent subjunctive uses. Hope this was helpful. Thank you for listening.